welcome to the Weekly Artifact. I'm Justin, and this is my co-host.
Hello, I'm Alex.
We're two former creative writing majors searching for meaning in a sea of content. Every other week, we'll select one piece of content each, an article, a video, another podcast that we found particularly interesting and discuss it. As always, our comments are our own and are not associated with any institution.
This show may contain explicit language or themes. See the show notes for specific content warning.
All right, Alex. So this week, my text is a video from the channel Hip Hop DX. It's called "Is Travis Scott Really for the Culture, or Does He Keep His Distance Like Post Malone?" Not the most succinct title, and they also do that annoying thing where they capitalize one word, this one being really. But despite the title, it's actually a good video. So I won't quote from it too much because I don't have the text in front of me, but I'll summarize it. Basically, the video is about whether or not Travis Scott supports the culture of hip-hop. Travis Scott, of course, is a rapper, for those who might not know, as is Post Malone. So the video is comparing Travis Scott to Post Malone, particularly in the beginning. It has a clip where Charlemagne of The Breakfast Club asks Post Malone what he's doing for Black Lives Matter, and basically Post Malone has no answer, meaning that he's doing nothing for Black Lives Matter. But Post Malone, his music is very hip-hop, but he chooses not to identify as a rapper. He says he just wants to be a person who makes music. And so the video sort of critiques him for profiting from hip-hop while at the same time distancing himself from it. Then it transitions to talking about Travis Scott. So it starts with Nick Cannon critiquing Travis Scott, saying that he lacks cultural equity. And then it sort of goes through that sort of line of thinking. Probably the most relevant part was when they show a clip from a Hot 97 interview that Travis Scott gave, where he basically he was talking about Mike Brown and Ferguson and basically criticized black people for being disruptive, as he put it, and putting themselves in positions where they would be subject to police violence, and implied that if black people want to live, they should stop wearing baggy clothes, which, is an interesting position to say the least. But his most recent controversy came during the Super Bowl, where he claimed to have gotten Colin Kaepernick's permission to perform in exchange for getting the NFL to donate some money to this Dream Corps organization. And then it came out that, in fact, Travis Scott did not get Kaepernick's permission to do that. So he lied about that. And the video sort of ends asking whether or not Travis Scott has an obligation to support black culture or hip-hop culture, given that he profits from it and has a platform from it, and asks whether or not we should have the same criticism for Big Boy, who is another rapper who also performed at the Super Bowl. And then sort of ends showing that his performance could have potentially been a statement if he had chosen to make one, such as taking a knee or wearing a Kaepernick jersey, but he did not. But does point out that there was, a lot of rappers were at the Super Bowl. So that's basically the video. It's worth watching the whole thing. I would always recommend the artifacts that we show. But I thought that for me, the video sort of nicely encapsulated the problem with identity politics, or at least a certain form of identity politics. And I thought the comparison between Travis Scott and Post Malone was relevant in this way, because Post Malone is a white rapper and Travis Scott is black. But we the video sort of lays out how they both have similar political commitments or lack thereof, and how sort of what they do is sort of more important than who they are in that sense, which I think when politics is used, or identity politics is used incorrectly, that point sort of gets lost. So that was the main reason why I like the video. But I also thought the question about whether or not people have an obligation to speak out if they're given a platform by a certain cultural movement, if they do have that obligation to speak out on behalf of that culture. I don't know, I think it's kind of complicated, but I would probably fall on the side that they should do it. I don't know if that's the same as having an obligation to do it. But I thought that was interesting as well. But I don't know if you had thoughts on it, Alex.
I was just curious, honestly, what you had to say about it, because I don't think either of us, but I don't think you're particularly big on like people being obliged to do anything, even with something like as necessarily, I don't know, important or like needed as like people like sticking up for like black culture, like Black Lives Matter with Travis Scott's like epic fumble in that fucking radio interview. You don't have to do anything just like as like a rule of nature, but like holy shit, you don't have to like set the conversation back 10 years.
Yeah, I mean that was another critique I have. The actual video was they sort of frame it as, oh, Travis Scott's just not that outspoken, which one is not really true even in the video itself, because we do see him speaking out just in the exact wrong way as someone
Right.
should. But also sort of the implication that, well, if you have a platform, not speaking out is sort of just a tacit endorsement of the status quo. It's not as if your silence means nothing. It sort of just means I don't think that there's anything worth critiquing. And actually, a good book I've read. I'd actually recommend this book just because it's funny, but there's a comedian, Jimmy Dore, who wrote a book, Your Country's Just Not That Into You. And in the first chapter, he sort of makes that point. But I would recommend that book. But yeah, I thought that was kind of weird where the video just sort of said, well, he's not that outspoken. It's like, well, he did speak a little bit.
Yeah. I didn't have too much to say. I just like Post Malone probably should do something. Like we talked about like the should instead of like need to or like have to. But like I don't know. There's nothing about him that strikes me as like attentive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess between this question of obligation. I mean, I know I have chosen not to listen to Post Malone, which is not too difficult of a choice to make. But I did listen to the Travis Scott Sicko Mode song, which is actually the only song I know of his. It's an okay song. I think I've sort of had my fill of it at this point, so it shouldn't be too hard to also stop listening to Travis Scott as well. But the point being, I think each person can sort of make their own individual choices of which artists they want to support. I know we sort of talked last week or 2 weeks ago about not watching the NFL anymore, in part because it's just too racist. And so I think similarly we
morally and entertaining, it's defunct.
Yeah. Right. So I guess the comparison actually goes both ways. Both the politics and the lack of excitement is there, both in the NFL and in Travis Scott. But yeah, my safe room for this week was almost going to be the Democratic primary, which I think has some connections to the identity politics angle I was talking about. I did change my safe room though, so I'll wait for another week. But yeah, I think this video is important for thinking about not just in our artists, but also perhaps in our politicians. What sort of commitments do we look for beyond just their identity? I think this video can sort of highlight that as well. So there's sort of a larger implication beyond just football or music. All right, so Alex, what was your article this week?
My artifact is a video called Comedian Tells Jokes, Everyone Loses Their Mind by Coffee Break. And it's talking broadly about the disconnect between hearing comedy when you're at an event to hear comedy, like a comedy club, versus when people read the joke written online, or if they see just a snippet of a specific joke or punchline. And how that the disconnect between the mood and the setting and the understanding leads to outrage. More concisely, more concretely, it is talking about the recently leaked Louis C.K. stand-up set, the first sort of full set that we have of him recorded since the fallout and incident of his serial sexual harassment of women in the field of comedy. Mostly it's talking about how when you are at a comedy club, it is very clear through the whole environment, the opening act, the collective full hour set of comedy, the drinks, the ambiance, all over lets you understand and appreciate that everything being said on stage, whether it's funny or not, or whether you agree with it or not, is a joke. But that is lost when you just sort of see a small bit on your like phone screen like 3 days after the fact as opposed to you like being there when it happens. And there is something to be said about that, but it also is a somewhat slippery slope to allow people to say whatever they want without any repercussions, just behind the defense of it's a joke. There is a defense of saying it was a joke, but that's not always the case, and it shouldn't always be the case. I think this person goes a little too broad with their defense, but that's not really why I wanted to talk about this. Mostly want to talk about the Louis C.K. stand-up set that was leaked in the end of January of 2019. Again, this is the first sort of large appearance he's made. He's like had done stand-up like smaller sets prior, since he said that he would take some time back, like off, and like listen. And obviously that wasn't, maybe it's as much time as he thought, but probably if he really wanted like a sort of wide embrace, and I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to give it to him, he decided that he would rather just sort of go head first and do it pretty immediately within like a year or 8 months. So that's fine. That's his decision. And there's been a lot of articles about how appalling and disgusting the entire stand-up is. And I would encourage anybody that cares enough to like have an opinion about this to like just listen to the stand-up set on YouTube. Like it's there, it's free. You're not giving Louis any money. You don't have to listen to it if you don't want to, but then just like you also like probably shouldn't care that much about the jokes, that these specific jokes. You can care that he like did those things, and you can care that he's like back in the like trying to get back like out there. But anyway, the two jokes that are sort of getting the most flack are jokes at the expense of kids in the Parkland shooting, but mostly just like school shootings in general, and the use of like they, them, and gender neutral pronouns and proper pronouns and chosen names and things like that. And they're both bits in this like a larger arcing joke about how kids today are boring, and how he was excited to be like a grouchy old man about at like kids just being dumb and reckless. And people are saying like the big complaint is that these jokes are like a very far and away like alt-right version of Louis now that he's been like kicked out of the good grace of the public eye. And there's only like one or two steps away from a joke. This is like a joke I personally feel like he'd make anyways. It's just his like lack of acknowledging that like the reason that they're like it's different now is because they can't afford to be like dumb and reckless kids like he was in like the 60s or 70s or 80s whenever like Louis grew up. But if you were just to say like, well, yeah, well, the problem is that it's all fucked up. And he says, like, the reason that people are so upset about, like, school shootings and kids dying is because they're young, which is not really the reason. It's because it's a, like, very controllable, like, obvious solution that, like, the rest of the, like, contemporary, like, first world countries have adopted of, like, gun control. Like, that's, like, actually why people are upset. But that's, like, not. That's, like, where the drop is. And the gender pronoun thing, like, obviously, like, people are still really care so much. So much they care about the pronouns people choose to go by, and that's a whole other thing. But it just, those two jokes fall flat because it is punching down, which is like a very sort of obvious like thing that isn't usually funny. But the rest of his set was like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. It was honestly pretty good. Like I don't know if you've listened to it, Justin.
No, I've not.
It's like honestly not bad. Like it really is. At first he talks about like the money he lost and how he like fucking hates the gold watch he bought like 2 days before this happened. How his mom sends him articles about like, you know, you're in the New York Times, but they're all articles about like him being a piece of shit. He's like, stop sending these to me. Like they're like those are like pretty good jokes. And like there's other jokes about just like parents like sticking together for like the sake of kids and things. And another joke that two other jokes that I saw on some articles that got some shit were about him talking about how he's upset about like not being able to use the word retard anymore. But it's not, his reasoning is because they used to just refer to people with like mental disabilities as being retarded, and that was fine because like people with mental disabilities didn't care, but people that weren't just kept calling each other retarded for like acting dumb. But then they started to feel bad about it, but it really doesn't have anything to do with the people with mental disabilities. And whether or not that's like actually true or not, like there is like something behind that. And it's not like, he's not just upset that he can't say retard anymore and he like really wishes he could. And it's like really, like it's like all PC culture. Like that's not really what he's saying with that joke. And the other joke was when he referred to his doctor as a just like called his doctor a bunch of slurs at the end of a joke about how much he loves ice cream. And it's like about 5 minutes worth of stand up about like how much he loves this doctor and how nice this doctor is and how like close and like intimate they are together. And as soon as the doctor says like you can't eat ice cream anymore, he like just absolutely goes off on him. And like yeah, he uses like very blue language, but like that's not new to Louis and it's not new to like comedians. And it's I mean he could just say like you piece of shit, but I mean there's more like emotive, powerful language to use, and he elected to do that. And there's consequences for every like word you use, but I mean, comedians are constantly deciding whether or not to censor themselves, and even if they like are vulgar, they're still in some capacity censoring themselves. That's just how humans operate. I'm never gonna give like Louis C.K. more money. I like really haven't before, but I'm not going to. But I like will watch like listen to his like stand up set out of morbid curiosity, if nothing else, on YouTube. It's fine. Mostly what I wanted, like my big thing is like those jokes are bad. Like the main jokes were bad that people are upset about were bad because they were just like aggressively punching down and didn't like he just like sort of very much removed himself from the situation. But also like you don't need to read like a 5 paragraph article about like how bad these jokes were when the like set is readily available and like free and like not that much time. Like if you care enough, you should just listen to it, which is just true of most things that like you can just like read an opinion article on it. You can just watch it and form your own opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that to go back to the original video, I think the main well I'll say that person who makes the coffee break videos, the person behind the coffee break channel, normally good. Normally he makes good videos. This one was a bit of a miss. If you sort of look at even the comment section, you'll sort of see there's some good critiques in the video in there. But the main thing that the video misses upon, in my opinion, is that it sort of runs on the premise that something can be quote unquote just a joke, and that the implication being that it has no meaning beyond the joke, or at least if there is a meaning, he doesn't explain what that meaning would be or why it would or would not be significant. So while I appreciate the point he's trying to make about context, I think just saying that the jokes are decontextualized doesn't explain what the jokes actually mean. And so the way that relates back to Louis C.K. is, as you said, he's sort of punching down in some of these jokes. And so even if they are just a joke, the effect is still sort of to, I don't know, make light of or belittle certain events or groups of people. And so, I don't know, I always found, I could be wrong. I don't know too much about the Governor's Comedy Club, but I saw a few defenses where, and even the original video sort of had this defense of, well, the audience is laughing, so it could have been that bad. But I'm like, I don't know, a bunch of rich New York City people.
It's Long Island,
like,
or no, it's Staten Island. It doesn't matter either way.
like, like the chances that there's people who could afford to get into this private comedy club that could be racist. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like that's not too far fetched.
No, the worst part about the Louis C.K. recording is either the guy that's recording it or the guy sitting next to the person that like is secretly recording it. The way this dude is like yucking it up and like his like side comments, like he's a bigger fan of Louis after the allegations came out. That's what the fuck he sounds like.
Well, that's the thing too. Like, not only is like the club itself seem to lend itself to perhaps a less than woke crowd, but also you got this double filter of people who would pay to see Louis C.K. post scandals. Like, doesn't like yeah. I think most people, because Louis' scandal was not just that he said the wrong thing. It was basically sexual harassment that I'm pretty sure he admitted to.
Oh, he did. No, he admitted to all of it.
It's
Yeah, he like in his apologies, like, yeah, I did that. I didn't like appreciate. Well, I don't know what he actually said, but no, he completely admitted to it. Like he agreed that it happened.
so It's yeah, the type of people who would pay money to see that person still are. I'm not saying that they're bad people, but it's a select group of people that are perhaps not going to be the most. You're not going to get the most socially conscious among us to be the first out to give Louis their money. And also, one context that is present is just the fact that Louis knows that he already has this perception following his scandals, and that he still decided that these were the jokes that he should do now. I don't know. I think a lot of people may have chosen to lay a little bit lower, not make fun of the Parkland survivors. um, yeah, this does vaguely remind me of a video that I think just came out. But yeah, there's another YouTube channel called ContraPoints that had a video called The Darkness, which also touched upon this. And if it was shorter, perhaps we would look at it more in depth. But basically, the point of the video was that there's going to be these sort of like dark situations in people's lives, and comedy could be a way to deal with it, but it should be about examining your own sort of experiences rather than trying to generalize other people's experiences that you might not know about.
He's fine. Like I like as far when I'm by the way when I say he's fine, I just mean like he lost. He's makes a joke about how he lost like $35 million in an hour once the scandal broke, but like that means he had $35 million to lose. Like he's fine either way. Like you don't need to feel sympathy for this man like in any capacity. You shouldn't, but like you don't need to either. Shall we venture to the safe room?
Sure, Alex. Let's go into the safe room. All right, so my safe room for this week is on foods that market themselves as being restaurant style. Now, I'm not that old, but I do remember a day when food used to have its selling point be that it was home style, food like your mother would make, perhaps. And not saying that mothers have to cook, but that was, that was just the times we were living in at that point. That's how the food would sort of market itself. Main point being that the food would try and portray itself as being tasting as if it was home cooked. But in the last few years, or perhaps several years now, I've noticed more foods that will say they're restaurant style, whether it be, I'll often see like tortilla chips, will say like, oh, like restaurant style tortilla chips or something, which I think is sort of a interesting change on its own that says something about the stage of late capitalism that we're in. But also, from my perspective, I just never really thought restaurant food was that good. Like, there's definitely some good restaurant food, but I've never been to a restaurant and been like, man, I wish I could have these tortilla chips at my house. So I don't really understand how that caught on. Anyways, but there's a more personal point to the story, which is that I was eating some restaurant food today, which is actually how my safe room topic got changed at the last second. I won't say exactly what company this was. I'm not trying to get sued, but I was eating some like Alfredo broccoli pasta or something. And first of all, I had to read these cooking instructions like 10 times because they made no sense. Rather, they were straightforward, but it just, I couldn't believe what I was reading. It said, so it was in this plastic container with this like plastic film over it, and said to put it in the oven at 400 degrees for 20 minutes, but only peel the corner of the film off so that it could let out the steam, but don't like take the film off. And I was like, this can't be right because this is just some plastic. So after 20 minutes, I took it out and the container was all warped and the plastic film had shrunk and pretty much fallen off. But you had to take it out and stir it around a little bit. So I did that and then put it back in for 10 more minutes, and the film had shrunk even more at that point. And now I will say the pasta itself tasted fine for what it was. I mean, I wasn't expecting, some authentic Italian cuisine here, but it definitely, it sat well with me taste wise. But immediately after I went out to play basketball, as I usually do on Sundays, and right towards the end, I was not sure if I was going to have to leave the game. I could just feel the something in my stomach, and so I will spare the details. But my rest of the afternoon after basketball was not very pleasant. I seem to have recuperated now, but I'm just hoping one day we can go back to food at least pretending to be home style, and perhaps a bump in quality, but this is likely a pipe dream.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, as far as like having really no relationship with the restaurant industry or cooking in that capacity, the most I can say about that is interviews with Anthony Bourdain, where he would say that restaurants food tastes good because they just probably triple the amount of like butter and fat that's usually in it, so it just tastes better, but it's not better for you. It's not good. Proportions are huge, but it's also like you can't like consistently do that and like expect any like good outcome. Like he personally would, being a professional chef, advocated for like home cooking anyways, like, which should say something about restaurant style food.
Yeah, I will say, even on the box it said with extra Alfredo sauce. So probably should have been my first clue as what I was in for.
Correct. Yeah, extra Alfredo has never ended well for anybody.
Yeah, I can only imagine how it would have tasted if I heated up the alternative way, which was to put it in the microwave for 6 minutes on high.
Holy shit.
Uh,
I don't be surprised if you get like an email from like whatever supermarket you bought it from saying that those have been recalled for improper instructions or something, like plastic poisoning. Just keep a lookout. You might be part of a class action. Get some good money for diarrhea.
We can only hope.
We can only hope. Okay, so my safe room is broadly about bullying, but mostly exclusively about bullying celebrities on social media and how that's impossibility, I'm going to say, is the word I'm going to use. My two citing examples being Demi Lovato and Millie Bobby Brown to varying degrees. Mostly, the entire thesis of my argument will be a tweet by Tyler, the Creator, abridged, saying, "How the fuck is cyberbullying real? Just walk away from the screen, like close your eyes." The smaller point of Demi Lovato being that there have been like cycling memes and jokes about 21 Savage being deported for like actually being British, and Demi Lovato like tried to get on the hype train and everybody like shit on her immediately. And she's like, "This is why I can't be on Twitter. Like, why am I gonna like try to like laugh at a joke and everybody brings up like me being an addict? Like, fuck y'all, I'm off Twitter again." To that extent, like, fine, be off Twitter. Like, bullying only works. Bullying only exists if you're like punching down, and I can't find a feasible way how anybody in a tweet can like punch up, or it can't not punch up to Demi Lovato, like, because you don't have to have a Twitter, you don't have to do these things, and she's also like unimaginably wealthy, or has a capacity to be unimaginably wealthy. I don't know what she does with her money, but theoretically she's unsustainably like rich compared to like the average person. And that's sort of all I have to say about Demi Lovato. She says a lot of dumb shit pretty consistently, I think, but that's neither here nor there, and has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. Millie Bobby Brown, more specifically, had a pretty like famous got off of social media after people were like starting this like very weird, kind of ironic, but sort of like got into like a weird zone of like hashtag like cancel Millie Bobby Brown, or like take down Millie Bobby Brown, or people would like make up like pretty blatantly false accusations about her like ripping off like people's like hijabs, or like throwing like hot coffee, and like kids wearing like pride like shirts at like McDonald's and things. And like the tweet about the hijab was like from a girl, and they were like, you don't even have like a hijab in your profile pic, and like her answer was because she took it off, like she tore it off. It was just like it was like a selfie in her car. So like none of these are obviously serious, and like theoretically, like you shouldn't bully or like make false accusations about like a random like 12-year-old at this point. But she's also making $20,000 per episode of Stranger Things. Millie Bobby Brown, for anybody that doesn't know, that name immediately plays 11 on Stranger Things. She's making $20,000 to $30,000 an episode for 10 episodes for 2 10-episode seasons, and is now set to make about $300,000 per episode for season 3 reportedly. So I theoretically I shouldn't be able to affect her in any real way, like exclusively that she like believes herself a vulnerable target. Twitter isn't a necessity or a right, like it's not a thing you need or like have to have. And she recently got back on like social media, and within the last like 2 to 3 like months, it's probably been more recent than that, but I'll just give myself that like elbow room. She made like self-proclaimed that she's a flat earther pretty immediately, and so like I don't know, like, is it really a bad thing that she was like decided to take herself off social media because everybody's making these like weird false accusations about her being a bigot? Like, we didn't lose anything. But what we got when she came back was another person saying that like the Earth's flat. Like, is that really what we needed in the culture? Like, I don't care that she's 15. She's also like gonna be a millionaire. Like, I don't care. I don't feel bad.
Yeah, I mean, bullying's definitely a complex issue. I don't want to make light of it, but
I'm not advocating bullying. I'm saying that this isn't bullying.
yeah, I think, well, first, I mean, Twitter in general is just a dunk fest. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever sent a tweet that wasn't an attempt to dunk on someone.
If not, you're not doing it right. Like, you gotta craft a better tweet.
So I think, I don't know, I mean, it's not saying if that's right or wrong, but I think anyone who's on Twitter is in some way being bullied, I guess. But yeah, I think, and I mean, I guess if you're being flooded with tweets that are disparaging, maybe it's hard to filter through which ones you want to read and which ones you don't. But yeah, to me, I mean, I don't know. If I was getting a bunch of mean tweets, I probably would stop looking at my notifications for that tweet, at least. And ultimately, if you want to leave Twitter, I think that's just a mental health decision that you have to make for yourself. I'm not really sure that's a national emergency. Yeah, I think I think it says something about people's attachment or perceived attachment to social media, perhaps not healthy. So yeah, and then I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess rich people have feelings too, but
you want to agree with me so badly, but you know that you should.
Yeah. Well, I'll just leave it at cyberbullying's nuanced, but it seems perhaps easier to avoid than other types of bullying in some ways. So
don't cyberbully anybody that doesn't have their own Wikipedia page. That's where I'll start.
Yeah.
Don't cyberbully anybody that has their own Wikipedia page, and you can actively find their net worth, and it's in the 7 figures range. After that, they're an open target.
I mean, no one's got to be getting cyberbullied more than Trump, I guess.
True, and keep doing it. Absolutely. I don't care. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah, overall, I think, perhaps cyberbullying made a bigger deal than it needs to be culturally. So that's our show for this week. See the show notes for a link to read and view the whole text for yourselves.
Music for the podcast was produced by Nicholas Pizzuto.
Join us again in 2 weeks as we find 2 new texts to discuss.
Just a friendly reminder, the president wants to fuck his daughter.